then at the end, we'll have time for questions at the end. Thank you, Whit.
You bet. Can you hear me okay? And is the slide looking right on the screen?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay.
We see your notes on the left. Is that still okay, or can you go into presentation mode?
No, that's fine. That's actually
Okay.
fine. Because that just kind
Whit, we're having a little intermittent volume. I'm wondering if you need to turn off your video screen, or if that's just me. You guys chime in before we jump in and get started. Can y'all hear Whit?
I cannot. He's frozen.
Okay. So Whit, if you turn off your video screen, that'll probably help you. Oh dear, did we lose him? Nothing like a great fresh start, huh? And he may have been trying to change a few things up. Okay, guys, we'll wait another second for Whit to jump on. Obviously, he's our main topic.
Where is he located?
Denver, Colorado.
Oh, that's right. I saw you guys working at the university.
You know, it's not us. It's Stephen Ritz from, Tower Gardens for Schools. He got the University of Colorado.
That's awesome.
Boulder. Yeah, super exciting. Okay, Whit, you're back with us.
So here's what I can do. If I'm having problems with my Wi-Fi, I went into, our little private cubicle so I wouldn't bother other people. But if it seems like the Wi-Fi is cutting out too much, I'll just go back into my office.
Okay.
So does it sound okay?
It does sound okay now. We'll keep you posted.
Freezing.
Oh, I'm sorry, Whit. You are freezing on us. You're probably going to have to move. Turn my sound on.
Yeah, we've lost you, Whit.
I'm sorry about that. Hold on.
This is the note.
It's 10 feet away. Just here we go.
I apologize, guys. Technology issues are always a challenge, aren't they?
I'm at the hop at
Okay. Is that sounding any better at all?
Oh, that's sounding much better. Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
okay. With that said, I'm going to turn off my or mute myself, but you do need to share screen again, right?
Right. Okay.
You still recording?
And let me be sure that it's recording still. Oh, it is. Okay, you're fine.
Okay. So it's working better now.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So before I jump into the slides, you had mentioned about microgreens. I do touch on microgreens very briefly at the end of this presentation, but I think if somebody is a dedicated microgreens farmer, I think it's worth doing a little bit deeper dive and kind of worth its own conversation. Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks for adding that.
So here's how I approach the let's see. There we go. So this is how I approach giving you a little bit of background on Spectra Grow today. I thought it would be useful just to answer some of the typical questions that I get from tower farmers. So these are some of the typical questions I get. When does Spectra Grow make sense versus the Tower Farms LED kits? Why is our 3D plant lighting important when you decide you want to go the route of top lighting? How does the Spectra Grow process work to develop a light plan? What's different in greenhouses versus indoor farms? What's all this about spectrum recipe? Why is that important? And then also the last two bullets there, looking at seedlings and microgreens. We're going to touch on that briefly, as well as some Bluetooth controls. So I think it's also useful to start with a little bit of a vocabulary conversation, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. I'm going to be using possibly words like PPFD, photoperiod, DLI, and you don't know these ground term. You may know very new terms to some people. In short, PPFD is the light intensity. Photoperiod is simply the number of hours during the day that a plant receives light. And then DLI is really just the intensity times the photoperiod, or PPFD times the photoperiod. And the reason why we care about DLI, which stands for daily light integral, which is the cumulative amount of light hitting plants during the course of a day, is, we found out that this is kind of how we can predict photosynthesis. Plants tend to follow patterns of photosynthesis based on that cumulative amount. Now, again, the cumulative amount could be equal if you have really high intensity for a short duration or a long duration with a low intensity. You're going to get the same DLI number, and you're going to get similar photosynthesis results, okay? Uniformity is something we talk an awful lot about, because that's the ratio of minimum to average intensity. I mean, none of this is a perfect science. You're never going to have the perfect exact amount of light hitting every single plant. We strive for that, but perfection's impossible. And so we use terms like uniformity to see how well did we get there. Uniformity above 0.5 is a good uniformity. And what that means is you're going to have more consistent plants going to be growing at similar rates. You're going to, have more predictable harvests. And so that's why that's important. Any questions on this? Okay. So here's one question that I get a lot. And I think it's important that I also explain the relationship between Spectra Grow and Tower Farms. It is one of very, open and honest partnership. There are times when the Tower Farms LED kits is the right solution. There are times when the Spectra Grow SG4 hanging fixture is the right solution. And like I said, with our relationship between our companies, it's never like this competitive, like don't think about it like that. It's just because Tower Farms has its own LED kits, we still have a great working partnership together. There are many times where I will say, actually, you know what? I think you're better off with the Tower Farms LED kits. There are other times when I say, you know what? If these things are important to you, we might have the solution that's going to address those in a little bit better way. So again, you've got two options out there. So the difference is, I would say the Tower Farms LED kits, now again, this isn't a hard and fast rule. I would say more often they're used in the smaller farms. Spectra Grow is used more often in the larger and commercial farms. But again, not a hard and fast rule. We've done, farms as small as 5 towers, but, and Tower Farms has done, very large farms too. The Tower Farms LED kits, they do really good vertical uniformity. I mean, that it's designed to follow the structure of the tower. So that it's a good design. It's easy to engineer, one size fits all, and it's often lower cost. So again, that makes sense in certain situations. Spectra Grow is going to be the solution when it's really important that the lights hang above the tower height. When you really like, especially in the, the more commercial operations where, you don't want the lights kind of in the way of your daily operations. Maybe some of your employees, maybe bothered a little bit by kind of light shining, and then you have to go turn the lights off or something. Spectra Grow solutions hang above, and so it takes that out of the equation. We are a little bit more engineering intensive up front, because we're going to do a layout that is optimized per farm. that we don't have a one size fits all solution. There is no way we could sell this product on Amazon because it's tailored very specifically to each farm and layout. We also have some different spectrum recipe options. So if you're growing a wide variety of crops, and maybe you're getting into fruiting and flowering plants like strawberries and tomatoes and peppers, you might want to consider some different spectrum recipe options for those types of crops. Our featured have to them be lower cost times. I would say that, and in some of the larger farms, but those are kind of the cases when we can be, financially comparable. We talk a lot about 3D plant lighting, and this is important if you have decided that you want to have what they call top lit tower farm. So you've decided, okay, for me, it's important I have the lights above the towers out of the way. If you have decided that, it's really important what we're able to do with our approach, because we take our 3D simulation tools and combine that with our advanced optics that we put over the LEDs. And with that, we're able to get really good uniformity up and down the towers. One of the challenges with typical top lighting LEDs that you might find on Amazon, for example, is they just have a symmetrical beam pattern. And if you put that at the top, you're going to grow the top canopy way too fast. You're not going to get enough photons down to the bottom plants on your towers. And then it's even going to get worse because as that top canopy grows faster and faster, it creates even more shading down below. So as you can see on this picture on the far right, this is what it looks like when we use one of our asymmetrical beam patterns. We can create these kind of unique patterns that throw the photons much further down the towers, and we're able to then create a much better vertical uniformity than if you just went with a standard top lighting LED. That has lots of benefits, less energy use, faster harvest, more yield, and better plant quality. We call it 3D plant lighting because we're not only looking and doing the analysis of the PPFD, remember the light intensity, on the horizontal plane, which is what most people do, but we also look at uniformity on the vertical plane as well. So we're looking at it from a three-dimensional aspect, which in a tower farm, that's super important because you're growing on a three-dimensional object. So you just can't take a two-dimensional approach to defining a light plan. Okay. So another question I get is, okay, well, Whit, you tell me you're a little bit engineering intensive up front. What do you need to know to get started? So there's just a couple basic things. And what we do is we take this information on this slide, and my team creates a 3D model of the farm. So in the 3D model, we put all the towers, we have the location of the walls and any windows and ceiling, and we even get into reflectance, like are your walls painted white, and how close are they to the wall? All of that goes into the software calculation. But here are the types of things we need to know. Number one, indoor versus greenhouse. I'm going to touch a little bit later in the next slides what's a little bit unique on a greenhouse versus an indoor farm. Everything else is the same. I need to know the crops to be grown because that's going to drive your DLI target and your spectrum recipe. Also, we need to know any photoperiod constraints. So there are some customers I have that are in a dark sky neighborhood. If anybody's familiar with that, they're not allowed to actually have any light coming out of their building or their greenhouse during certain hours of the day, which really puts a constraint on our analysis. We have to account for that. And then other customers, especially in Europe right now, say, hey, we have this variable electricity pricing, so we kind of have to play with the DLI calculations of running certain hours of the day. The most important information that usually everything kind of stops until we get to these last two things. We really need to know the building information. We really need to know the structure. Blueprints are great, but if you don't have that, at least, dimensions, features, constraints, sometimes people say, oh yeah, and by the way, we got this big tube going right down the middle. So, that is a constraint of where we could hang lights from. Those are the things we need to know. And then also the Tower Farms layout. Tower Farms usually does a great and pretty quick job of getting a 2D CAD layout for us. And this has all the information on this one. You can see, like, it's got the dimensions, the width of the aisle. It's got the dimensions between the last tower and the wall. It's got everything we need to know, location of the doors and things like that. So in this one, we can also see some of the constraints, but certainly the layout. So let me touch real quick on the difference in greenhouses. For greenhouses, we're designing for supplemental lighting. In indoor farms, we're designing for sole source lighting. In an indoor farm, our lights are going to be the only source of photons for photosynthesis. But for a greenhouse, we want to take advantage of the natural sunlight. So what we do is we get the address of the greenhouse and we go to the databases we have access to from NASA and some other places, and we get 20 years of historical sunlight data. And then what we do is we design for the worst case. So in North America, the worst case is December. And so when we know our DLI target, for the plant, the types of crops you're going to grow, we see what kind of DLI we're going to get naturally, and then we design for the gap. Okay. So this is what that looks like. So if you look here in December, so this is an actual customer. We looked at the natural DLI. So in December it was 13.24. Now you don't get all of that DLI into the greenhouse. You do have to ratchet that down a little bit. So we usually discount for 30% just for shading angles, just the penetration through the greenhouse glass and all that. So in this particular case, the customer we wanted to design for a 17 DLI target. So we're getting 9.27 from the sun. So we just need to make up the rest, right? We need to make up 7.73. And so then we look at, okay, based on how many, what intensity we designed for, and the number of hours of supplemental lighting we would provide each month, we would get to that total DLI. So again, December being the worst case, if we ran this layout for this customer for 16 hours, we would bring them up to 17.4 DLI. So we would meet our target for December. And then you wouldn't need to run the lights as many hours in the other months because you have more natural sunlight in those other months. And then obviously you see in the summertime, you probably don't even need to run the lights. Now, we do consider this a minimum because there are many cases where you do have some shading issues, and some people want to, there's some crops where you want to extend the days. So, there's some specific cultivars of strawberries, for example, that even in, April, even if you had enough natural sunlight, you didn't have the number of hours that the strawberry needs. So you may still need to run the lights for some hours to meet that other criteria. But again, this just gives you kind of an idea of how we come up with the calculation for how much supplemental lighting in a greenhouse. Now, everything else is exactly the same. So what we do, like I said, we create a 3D model of your farm. I thought I chose that 5-tower farm proposal we did because it showed up a little bit bigger on the screen. And you can tell that in the model, how important it is that we get the layout correct and in the room and understand the dimensions of the room, because you can see those reflections on the wall. Those do add photons back to the plants. I mean, especially if you paint your walls and ceilings and floors white, you get a lot of photons bouncing around back onto plants. So it helps. So our software takes that into consideration, and it helps increase the intensity and the uniformity. So we create a 3D model of the farm. We play with a lot of different layouts, and then we kind of when we hit those targets we're looking for in terms of light intensity, the PPFD, and the uniformity, then we'll create some heat maps. Now, heat maps is kind of the final part in the process. It kind of brings the human element of engineering back into the process, because the rest of the software is just spitting out numbers and blah blah blah. But there's so many numbers that it's actually valuable. My team will build this 3D heat map, and they'll just rotate it around, and they'll look at every nook and cranny and see if something jumps out, like, oh, there's a hot spot right there, we missed that, or there's a cold spot over here. Because again, hot spots can create bolting, tip burn, and cold spots can create that shade avoidance response, giving you leggy plants. So we want to minimize hot spots and cold spots. We want to get as high uniformity as we can at that PPFD and DLI target for the crops that you're growing. Any questions so far? All right. So here's our deliverables back to you. We give you a plan view, give you a section view, because again, being really a 3-dimensional light plan, not only is it important where you locate the fixtures within the towers looking down, but the height is also very important, because again, we're using asymmetric optics, and they are directional. So in fact, we even give you an installation manual, like you have to make sure they're rotated the right way, that they're pointing the right directions, because the asymmetric optics are directional. Okay, so I get a lot of questions sometime about Spectrum. What is it about Spectrum recipe? Why does it matter? Why do I care? Do I care? Some people say, oh, you got to have broad spectrum, or you got to have full spectrum. I mean, there's all these words that get thrown around out there. And let me tell you what's really important. The thing that impacts plant growth by far the most is DLI, getting the PPFD, the light intensity, and the photoperiod correct. That impacts plant growth so much more than spectrum. So spectrum comes into play after you've solved that problem. If you've got the right DLI, you got the right PPFD and right photoperiod, then let's talk about spectrum. For leafy greens, an optimal red-blue ratio is around 3. So our general purpose horticulture spectrum, which is great for leafy greens, or even mixed, if you have some leafy greens and some flowering or fruiting plants, this is a good one. It's gonna maximize they're gonna increase chlorophyll and the to magnesium. But the other thing that I think people really is, but Whit, what's the deal green or about full spectrum? The issue is, when people talk about full spectrum, they're typically talking about lights that were designed for humans. So when a human sees a certain ratio of red, green, and blue, our brain says that is white light, okay? There is no such thing as white light, okay? It doesn't exist. It's a construct in our brain. And so a lot of people say, oh, you got a full spectrum. Well, I don't like that word because it didn't tell you anything. What is important is that you do have red and blue for photosynthesis, and you do have green for plant inspection. Now, there is some biological benefits to green, but you don't get a lot of photosynthesis bang for your buck. So it's a waste of electricity to have too much green in your recipe to try and make it so perfectly white that that you think it's this human-centric lighting. What we need enough green so when you're looking, they are, because remember, see color as reflection. If I showed you a spectrum recipe that didn't have any green, it only had red and blue, and you shined it on green leaves of your plant, it would look black. You would not be able to tell the health of your plant. So we put in enough green so you get that reflection. You can look at your plants, your green leaves, and say, oh, okay, I'm having this issue, or this is healthy, this is what I want. But we don't put so much green that we're just wasting electricity. Okay. So that's the key takeaways for leafy greens. Now, if, and I say if, you do have a farm or you have a section of farm that is completely dedicated to fruiting and flowering plants, then I would introduce the conversation about adding some far red into the conversation. Now, far red is simply the red above 700 nanometers. So that part on the far right, that 700 to 800 nanometers is what we call far red. So as you can see, it's basically the same recipe as before, but we're adding, 10% in. It can be a very useful tool for fruiting and flowering plants because far red induces a stretch. Your branches are going to get further apart. You're going to have a more expanded plant canopy. So you're going to get better airflow. And when you get better airflow, what do we get? We get reduced pests, we get reduced fungus and mold. And it even makes pollination success. It really enhances pollination opportunity. If your canopy kind of broadens and widens. It can also impact fruit shape. So I've seen some pepper plants, where the branches are so tight and that pepper, as it grows, it kind of gets kind of gnarled in between the branches. So then when you go to sell it, it's kind of this gnarled looking kind of pepper. Again, it can be useful for peppers because, again, if you spread the branches out a little bit more, that pepper is going to have a little bit more room to grow into a little bit nicer looking shape. It can impact which be important in things like strawberry and things like that. So it's, again, dedicated farm, dedicating flower plants. If you're going to have a mixture in your greens, I would feed greens. Okay. Get a lot of questions also about, okay, well, what do we do for seedlings? Or what do we do for microgreens? So I'm just going to touch on this as kind of the same topic, seedlings and microgreens. I'm going to throw them into the same bucket. If you use tables or benches, whatever you want to call them, so it's like a single layer, we can use that same SG4 hanging fixture. So the picture on the left is kind of how we would model that. Picture on the right is actually that's from LinkedIn in Dublin, Ireland. So they did a table of seedlings. So we hung, and in this case, we don't need to use an asymmetrical lens. We can actually use a symmetrical lens because now we're really looking at things. The two dimension, the two dimensions are actually probably a little bit more important here. We want to make sure we're covering that area of those seedling trays correctly. However, if you are using like multi-level racks or shelves, trays, I'm not even sure what the right word is. We also have another product called SGL Slim. It's a linear LED bar. It's about 4 feet long, and same thing applies here. We would do a 3D simulation of your rack. Now, there are some racks that are kind of becoming standardized. So if you send me information and I see, oh, well, we've designed something for that exact rack before, that'll cut our engineering time. But at the same time, a lot of people are kind of, do it yourself on the seedling racks. And so sometimes it varies quite a bit, the distance between the shelves, how wide your trays are and things like that. So again, I would want to know kind of those dimensions, and we can come up with a solution for that. So kind of in summary on the lighting fixtures, two main fixtures to think about: the SG4, the hanging fixture, and the SGL Slim linear bar. Now, the only other thing I threw in here just as kind of a curiosity factor is we do have some Bluetooth controls. Look, a lot of people do control a lot of different ways. So this is just kind of, if you don't have anything else, or if wireless would actually be a value to you, that you don't want to run wiring, but you do need to have some control mechanism. This might be an option for you. We have what we do is we have a controller on each of the fixtures. We have an app that you commission it to the scheduler, and then basically you can set the schedule. So this is for people that want to have maybe they don't want to just do on and off. They want to do maybe a slower ramp up in the morning and a slower ramp down in the evening, or they want to do some sort of variable. Hey, and they want to be able to control that from a computer and do that wirelessly. This costs money, so there's definitely less expensive ways to do on-off photo period control. There's analog timers you can put in breaker boxes. That's going to be a less expensive solution than this, but just so that it exists. So I am happy to answer whatever questions you've got. If this kind of spurred any curiosities, that's a picture of the Altius greenhouse in Denver. In fact, I live right behind that, actually.
Wow, Whit, great job. I always learn new words from you. I don't know if you guys are feeling that way, but gosh, whole new vocabulary in lighting, right? And Whit, as I mentioned to James, is just a technology geek. He knows so much more than I do. But I love it. And that's a compliment, Whit. Yeah, you know that, right?
Yeah.
So unmute yourselves and feel free to ask questions. I'm curious what stood out to y'all, and if you have specific questions.
And I'll jump in first and just say I've got now both of those systems. So I've got the linear one that I'm using for special seedlings, and I'll use that all the way through the summertime even. I just found it worked really well to have the herbs, and in springtime, like tomatoes and zucchini and squash, we grow a lot of seedlings, as you guys know. And so having that system just to have like four trays of seedlings that are always lit. And I found it very easy. It's so light, and it's actually tiny, really, and it has worked really well. And then I've only just received the hanging fixture, so it's not actually hanging yet. That area of the greenhouse has been broken down, and we've cleaned all the towers and the tubs, but it's about to go back up, and I'll be hanging that one over a section on the sort of the furthest away from sunshine in the greenhouse that I could find. And so I'll be kind of testing out how that works in comparison to the towers that aren't being lit by it. So just so you guys know, I'm trying out both, and I'm playing around with both. And so we'll learn a lot in the next few weeks.
Cool. I look forward to hearing how that goes when she gets the SG4 installed.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Yeah, and it all looks really easy the way you've packaged it, and it all comes with hanging stuff, and it's all very simple and easy to do. So that was helpful. Other than that, everything you said went right over my head.
No. Angela, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I have two questions. One real life question, like for immediate use, and that would be when you're using it with the seedlings, do you have to change your distance, your height from the seedling tray, like as they get bigger, or do you just, is at one level and it's going to manage the seedlings from seeds to 2 inches?
Good question. Good question. We would design it to where it would work all the way through its life, assuming you're just going to 2 inches. Okay. If you're growing plants that are going much more than that, like if you're actually going up to like 5 inches, we would probably think about it differently. Now, we can still design for something that you don't have to change the height. But what we do is, because I mentioned before, kind of our secret sauce is that combination of 3D simulation tools and the LED optics. Yeah. We would probably choose a different set of optics, kind of depending upon that layout. So depending upon the distance you've got and depending upon the height of the plant, we might choose a different set of optics, because what can happen is as the plants grow, again, at 2 inches, you're going to be okay. But at 5 inches, you can now start getting cross shading, from one seedling to the other. So we actually might put in 2 bars with a wider beam pattern, so we can actually hit the plants from many different angles. But if it's really just a 2-inch seedling, then we should be able to design the right optic that's going to hit exactly that size of your tray, and we'll accommodate in the calculation that it's going to go from 0 to 2 inches. We'll decide it.
The other future thought process that I would love to have in some distant future is I've really thought about maybe doing some sort of geothermal where you dig down into the earth like 6 or 7 feet, and you're really dependent on real lighting for that. Have you guys done some studies underneath the ground? Because I know in a wall, yeah, you could probably paint it white and get some better stuff like that. But if you're talking about the earth, there's no reflection there. So
Right.
have you designed something? Have you designed a system for something like that?
Well, we've designed some systems in some strange buildings, but if it's actually going to be in an underground bunker, we would just have to put into the assumptions in the software that we're going to have, kind of brown to black walls that are going to absorb any extra photons, and they're not going to reflect them back to the towers. And what that means is you're going to need more lighting. When you do have buildings and the walls are closer and they're highly reflective, it actually can help you reduce the number of fixtures you need.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I have one question as well. You were speaking about, of course, the plant has greater light needs, as the seasons change. So does it adjust in any way, and like on its own through like a photo sensor or anything like that, as far as the time of year, or is that something that you just manually set?
Great question. And Severin, I think on Instagram, I think you asked me to tell you about this project. So up until December, I would have said most people do it manually. So December, they set their timer for 16 hours. January comes, they got to remember to set it to 13. Or if they have a greenhouse management system, sometimes they can program that in, right? Or they could remind them. In December, we did a project in collaboration with a company called Leafficient. You could go to any of Spectra Grow's social media profiles, and you could see some information about this. We just got this posted the other day, and in fact, I don't know if you read iGrow News, but iGrow News even picked up on the project, and they called me and they interviewed me and got some more commentary, and then they wrote an article about it as well. So that system, in fact, we did this with a tower farm in Bentonville, Arkansas, called Good Life Farms. And that system, the Leafficient system, it has multispectral cameras, and it's got a variety of sensors. It's got light sensors and temperature and humidity. And their system is looking at the health of the plant, and it's also measuring, how much natural sunlight is coming in. And it then adjusts our lights to, come on or come off or dim down to a certain amount, based on its computer algorithm is telling the lights, what the plant needs at that moment. So that is an automated way to do that. Again, this was the first project we've done with Leafficient, so it just got installed right before Christmas. So I don't have a lot of data to share, but like I said, we did put it all out on social media so people could, start to ask about it. But that's that I think is where we're going in the future. I think we're going in the future to being able to collect all this information about the environment and about the health of the plants, and take that into the computer and send out signals to our LED lights and tell our LED lights what we need to be doing. Do we need to be on? Do we need to be off? Do we need to be at 70%, 40%, etc.?
Sounds amazing. The greenhouse that you were speaking of in Denver, is that, where's that located in Denver? Because I think it's the one that I've seen about a half a dozen times, and I've been dying to go in it, but have not.
It's downtown, and it's
Mhm.
in a neighborhood called Rhino, which stands for River North.
Yes,
It's kind of an
yes,
arts district, and it's right on
it is.
top of the most amazing Japanese restaurant called Uchi.
And
so
it's, I have been to Uchi, and I just want to make sure it was the same. It looked the same on the photo, but yes, I used to go to Colorado very frequently. I do not go there as often as I used to, but yes, next time I'm in Colorado, I will definitely give you a call, because I've seen it so many times and thought I just want to go in and
For
check it
sure.
out,
You bet.
because it glows up the entire sky at night.
It does. It does. It does.
Okay, that's interesting.
If you guys are not following Altius, which is the farm we're referring to, ALTIUS, on Instagram, you need to be, because she has an incredible farm, and she's a friend. And anytime you want to visit one of these farms, please let us help you with that, because there's a protocol of how we, just like people don't just show up at ours or call us direct if they are in the area. So we'll help you get in. But yeah, that's a pretty incredible farm, and congratulations, Whit, on the new lighting there. We're excited for them.
They ask us, they do a CSA. We get a weekly delivery of greens from them. So they ask us to do a little video that they used, to kind of advertise their CSA program. But we did, my wife and I, we kind of had some bloopers in the video.
Yeah.
that got cut out of the final version. So I'm gonna post on TikTok, and I guess I can do it on Instagram too. I'm gonna post the original blooper, initial blooper video of making that.
James and I watched that video.
There's a couple funny parts. I'm gonna see if I can get that posted maybe tomorrow.
Right. We have just a few more minutes, and if you need to pop off, you're fine. Whit, I think you did an excellent job just kind of giving us a high-level summary. Guys, the reason why we wanted to be sure you understood the Spectra Grow solution is because you as farmers might need this, but you are also always on the lookout for prospective farmers that you can work with us to, share the Tower Farm solution. So I just think it's good for you to understand that, there are options, and Whit obviously is very knowledgeable about lighting. And so if you have additional questions or you want to chat with Whit directly, that is totally fine. And just so you know, we do not make money off of Whit's services, and he does not make money off of our services. We are just choosing partners that are strategic and long-term good fits for our farmers. And when I say we, Tower Farms, who is the umbrella of, all of the farms around the country. So I know it was a lot to take in today, but hopefully, Michelle, you got some of your questions answered.
Yes, I made a lot of notes, and I'm familiar with definitely not all of his what he was speaking of, but a really large portion of it. So, and I definitely have an interest, and I will be in touch.
Perfect.
I have a very strange, I have one strange greenhouse and one very perfectly normal greenhouse. So
you do have some unique qualities. You're right, to your greenhouses. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Whit, for your time and your presentation. And if anyone needs more information from Whit, obviously he's in our email thread, so you can just reach out via email. But if you need his cell number, let me know. We'll text that to you. But you're a great partner, Whit. We're so glad to have you available for us.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk to everybody today and share a little bit of what we do. Thanks for setting this up.
Sure. Okay, guys, we'll have a February call and I will put together a date and send it to you. I actually should have turned off the recording earlier, huh?